Anatoly Onoprienko, a name etched into the annals of true crime as one of the most horrifying serial killers in modern history, is a chilling figure whose violent legacy still reverberates through Ukraine. Dubbed the Terminator for his calculated and robotic style of execution, Onoprienko's murderous spree claimed the lives of 52 innocent victims between 1989 and 1996. The sheer brutality and randomness of his attacks shocked the nation and left a trail of devastation that no community could forget. This story delves deep into the darkness of Onoprienko's life, tracing his troubled beginnings, the progression of his crimes, the terror he instilled in his victims, and the final reckoning that brought his reign of terror to an end. Anatoly Onoprienko was born on July 25, 1959, in Lasky, a quiet village in Ukraine's Zhytomyr Oblast. His early life was steeped in tragedy. At the tender age of 4, he lost his mother, an event that would forever alter the trajectory of his life. His father, unable to care for both Anatoly and his older brother, made a heart-wrenching decision. He sent young Anatoly to an orphanage. The orphanage, cold and impersonal, became a breeding ground for Onoprienko's resentment and alienation. He grew up feeling abandoned, unloved, and deeply bitter. The emotional scars left by his childhood manifested as anger and a lack of empathy for others. While his older brother managed to carve out a stable life, Anatoly became increasingly withdrawn and troubled, choosing a path of crime and violence that would lead to unimaginable horrors. As a young adult, Onoprienko drifted aimlessly through life. He initially trained to become a sailor but quickly abandoned that pursuit. Instead, he turned to petty theft and other criminal activities to sustain himself. He was known for his cunning, his ability to manipulate others, and his complete disregard for societal norms. In the late 1980s, Onoprienko began escalating from petty theft to more serious crimes. It was during this time that he committed his first murders, a grim prelude to the bloodbath that would follow. Onoprienko's first known victims were 2 hitchhikers he encountered on the road in 1989. Armed with a shotgun, he executed them in cold blood and looted their belongings. The murders were calculated, devoid of passion or hesitation. It was as if he were testing the waters, gauging his capacity for taking human life. The randomness of the act and the lack of any clear motive made the crime especially chilling. Onoprienko's ability to blend back into society after the murders, living an unremarkable life while harboring dark secrets, marked the beginning of a pattern that would make him one of the most elusive and dangerous killers in Ukraine. For 6 years, Onoprienko managed to suppress his murderous urges or at least avoid detection. But in 1995, something snapped. The killer who had previously targeted individuals now turned his attention to families. The shift was drastic, and the scale of his violence increased exponentially. Onoprienko's modus operandi was both methodical and terrifying. He would select isolated homes in rural areas, break in under the cover of darkness, and systematically slaughter everyone inside. His victims ranged from infants to the elderly, and no one was spared his wrath. Armed with a shotgun, he executed his victims quickly and efficiently. After the killings, he would loot their homes for valuables, sometimes setting the house on fire to destroy evidence. His attacks were senseless, motivated by greed, a need for control, and a deeply rooted hatred for humanity. One of the most infamous episodes of Onoprienko's killing spree occurred in January 1996. He targeted the Pilat family, who lived in a small village. Breaking into their home, he shot the parents and their 2 young sons. After ensuring that everyone was dead, he ransacked the house and set it ablaze. Neighbors reported seeing the flames from a distance but were too terrified to approach. By the time authorities arrived, the house was reduced to ashes, and the remains of the Pilat family were charred beyond recognition. The community was left paralyzed with fear, knowing that a ruthless predator was on the loose. As Onoprienko's body count rose, fear gripped the Ukrainian countryside. Families fortified their homes, some even abandoning their villages altogether. The randomness of the killings made them all the more terrifying. There was no discernible pattern to who would be targeted next. Law enforcement agencies were overwhelmed, resources were stretched thin, and the killer's ability to evade capture only added to the frustration. Onoprienko moved frequently, staying in hostels, abandoned buildings, and remote areas. His nomadic lifestyle and the chaotic post-Soviet state of Ukraine made tracking him an almost impossible task. On April 16, 1996, after months of intense investigation, law enforcement finally caught a break. Acting on a tip from an acquaintance who suspected Onoprienko, police raided his hiding place. Inside, they found damning evidence: firearms, stolen valuables, and detailed notes about his crimes. Onoprienko was arrested without resistance. During his interrogation, he confessed to 52 murders with chilling detail. He described each killing as if recounting an ordinary day, showing no remorse or empathy for his victims. He claimed that voices in his head had compelled him to kill, and that his actions were part of a divine plan. Onoprienko's trial began in 1998, drawing massive public and media attention. People were eager to see the man who had brought so much terror to their country. Dubbed the Terminator by the press, Onoprienko's cold and emotionless demeanor in court only added to his infamy. He showed no remorse during the proceedings, describing his victims as targets and dismissing their humanity. Psychologists who examined him were struck by his lack of empathy and his robotic approach to violence. He was deemed a psychopath, incapable of understanding the moral implications of his actions. The court found Onoprienko guilty of 52 murders and sentenced him to death. However, Ukraine's moratorium on the death penalty meant that his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. Onoprienko spent the remainder of his life in solitary confinement at Zhytomyr prison. He refused interviews and remained a shadowy figure, offering little insight into his motivations. For the families of his victims, his incarceration brought some measure of justice, but the scars of his crimes remained. On August 27, 2013, Anatoly Onoprienko died of heart failure at the age of 54. His death marked the end of a dark chapter in Ukraine's history, but his story continues to serve as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. The crimes of Anatoly Onoprienko left an indelible mark on Ukraine. His killings exposed weaknesses in law enforcement and underscored the devastating consequences of societal neglect. For the victims' families and the communities he terrorized, the wounds may never fully heal. Onoprienko's story remains one of the darkest tales in true crime history, a stark reminder of the evil that can lurk beneath the surface of ordinary life. His actions serve as a haunting testament to the capacity for human cruelty and the enduring pain it leaves behind. The legacy of Anatoly Onoprienko is more than just the statistical horror of 52 lives extinguished. It is a chilling study in the mechanisms of unchecked violence and societal failure. His story is retold not only to understand his motives but also as a cautionary tale for a society struggling with the balance of justice and mental health awareness. The impact of Onoprienko's crimes reached far beyond his victims and their families. The rural communities of Ukraine, already grappling with economic instability and a fractured post-Soviet identity, found themselves paralyzed by fear. The randomness of Onoprienko's attacks meant that no one felt safe, and a collective paranoia gripped the nation. Entire villages would band together to keep watch at night, barricading doors and windows, while law enforcement was stretched to its limits trying to track a killer who was always one step ahead. Ukraine's media played a critical role in shaping the narrative of the Terminator. The constant barrage of sensational headlines added to the public hysteria, but also pressured authorities to act. Politicians, desperate to restore public confidence, demanded swift action, but the structural inefficiencies within the law enforcement system meant that Onoprienko continued his spree largely unchecked until his final capture. Even in his death, Anatoly Onoprienko remains an enigma. Psychologists who studied him described his psyche as a labyrinth of contradictions. On one hand, he was calculated and methodical in his killings, showing a high level of intelligence and strategic thinking. On the other hand, his claims of hearing divine voices and his apparent lack of remorse painted a picture of a deeply disturbed individual detached from reality. Some experts speculated that Onoprienko suffered from a severe personality disorder exacerbated by his traumatic childhood. Others believed that his actions stemmed from a deliberate choice to reject humanity, driven by a cold, nihilistic worldview. The killer himself provided little clarity, often deflecting questions with cryptic and contradictory statements. The case of Anatoly Onoprienko forced Ukraine to confront its shortcomings in handling violent crime. However, the systemic issues that allowed his spree to go unchecked for so long, underfunded police departments, lack of mental health resources, and poor coordination between agencies remain problems in many parts of the world. Onoprienko's story is a stark reminder of the cost of neglecting these critical areas. For the families of his victims, the wounds remain raw. The loss of a loved one is a pain that time can dull but never fully erase, especially when that loss comes at the hands of someone as monstrous as Onoprienko. Their lives, forever altered, are a testament to the far-reaching impact of his crimes. Even after his death, the specter of Anatoly Onoprienko lingers in Ukraine. His name is invoked as a symbol of unchecked evil, a cautionary tale about the consequences of societal failure. His crimes serve as a grim reminder of the fragility of human life and the ease with which it can be taken away by someone devoid of empathy or remorse. As the years pass, Onoprienko's story continues to be studied by criminologists, psychologists, and true crime enthusiasts. It is a tale of horror and heartbreak, but also of resilience and the unyielding human spirit in the face of unimaginable tragedy. His victims are remembered not as numbers in a grim tally, but as individuals whose lives were unjustly cut short by a man whose darkness seemed to know no bounds. Anatoly Onoprienko's place in history is assured, not as a man, but as a manifestation of evil. His calculated brutality, his cold detachment, and his complete disregard for the sanctity of life make him one of the most chilling figures in the annals of true crime. His story serves as a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity and the importance of vigilance, justice, and compassion in preventing such horrors from ever occurring again.